Welcome to the podcast where we take a deep dive into the stories behind construction business leaders. We will share how they got started, how they found success, and the lessons learned along the way. I'm your host, Eric Fortenberry. Welcome to Builder Stories. Welcome back, everybody. Today, I'm here with Bob Perez, who is a partner with Stephen Thomas Construction, located in Austin, Texas. Really excited to have you on the podcast here, Bob. Welcome to Builder Stories.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Eric.
Yeah, appreciate it. So why don't you, just kind of give us a quick little background for everyone out there. Who are you? How did you get into construction in the first place? What led you to start your construction business? What do you guys do? Things like that.
Yeah. So we're Stephen Thomas Construction, based in Austin, Texas. We specialize in residential additions, remodels, new construction, and then we do some light commercial as well. I started the company with my partner back in 2019, and I don't come from a construction background. I had an 11-year corporate career, and it was doing a lot of business development for an energy consulting firm. And I was able to, live everybody's dream of just kind of walking out of their corporate job and, wanting to work for myself. So I started off kind of just, I didn't, know what a rough-in was, and had no idea of the, anything about the construction business. But I had a partner of mine who was looking to kind of grow their construction business and needed somebody with a little bit more experience in working in a more structured environment, we'll put it. So, and I, getting into the business, I just, I think I'm one of the crazy people that really enjoyed my own personal remodel and working with my general contractor. And I would think to myself a lot of times, like, while I was working with them and just miserable at my corporate job, how much fun that would be to get to work in that kind of environment. And I love I love how tangible construction is. Construction is one of those things that it's, there's a start, usually there's a finish, but making something real. And there's just a tremendous amount of job satisfaction in doing that, that I get that I just wasn't getting in the corporate world. So, it's obviously not all sunshine and rainbows. Everybody knows that. But I love the challenge of it. I love, problem solver at heart. And so this is a business where that's what you're doing all day, every day. And so that's a little bit of, background about myself and the company and, how we got started. So,
yeah, that's awesome. So, 2019, right around, same time we started Job Tread as well. I can attest to it. What wasn't the easiest to start a business in the middle of COVID.
No,
I'm curious how that, so you and your partner, so what are you guys like? What, who focuses on what within the business? Like, are you project management, you sales, vice versa? How did you guys decide who was gonna do what?
Sure. So we really leaned into our strengths. Like I said, I've got a corporate background, kind of business development, and my partner comes from the production world. So he spent a lot of time at a large national builder. He's a landscape architect by trade. Worked in the family business for some time, and then went to production, and then went into custom home building. So his experience and knowledge in the actual, building process is critical. And so I focus more on the back end tasks. I think right now as a boutique builder with, with two people, we rely heavily and we don't self-perform any work. So we're very lucky to have such a talented trade base and trade partners that we work with. But I serve, I think, what would be traditionally, in addition to kind of running the business and business development, when it comes to the actual projects themselves, more of a project coordinator pre-construction. And then Jared, my partner, handles more of the project management, field supervision once construction starts. So, when we're talking to new clients, that's kind of the process that we outline. If me, I'm involved in the project from start to finish, as is Jared, but there's a lot more of me in the beginning as we run through our pre-construction process, which is a very rigid kind of checklist of items that we need to decide on, long lead times, things like that. And then that kind of, leading all of the weekly meetings. And then as we transition into the build phase, that relationship and lead kind of switches over to Jared. But it's obviously important that we're both involved at every phase. It's just really who's taking the lead on the action items and driving, those decisions. But that's, we didn't just do that right out of the gate. We tried a couple different iterations of kind of individually project managing, but I think we fell short at times because we weren't leaning into what we were really good at. And so since we actually made that switch or kind of established those roles about, I would say maybe a little less than a year ago. And we've really seen things start to kind of click for us, and a lot of happy clients, and we're keeping things on schedule and on budget, and communications a lot tighter. So yeah, that's what's been working for us.
Yeah, that's super interesting, because I do find that people, when everyone kind of tries to sort of do a little bit of everything, and kind of bringing in their own projects and managing their own projects, like it can be a lot more difficult than really identifying the roles and responsibilities, kind of setting those clear lines, those lanes on who's going to do what. And it sounds like it's kind of been a good welcome transition for you all to really identify that, and you're both still very involved in every project, but like it's got a little bit more of a clean handoff into who's going to manage what.
Exactly. You just, you try to eliminate overlap. And I had an old boss that he had a saying. He's just, everything had to have, he called it an AOL. We'll just call it, whose butt is on the line for this task and ownership. And so establishing those that, who's on the hook for this, like so we don't leave things hanging in the wind and, thinking, oh, well, I thought you had it. And I think that's been, because it's, I've had a couple of other ventures, and, partnerships don't always work out, the way they thought. But I think that's been a huge piece of our success in our partnership, has been that ability to communicate. You lean on each other. There's a trust there. Letting the others, focus on their strengths and their tasks, and focusing on your own, and just, making sure that you're constantly communicating and collaborating, moving up all forward. So, yeah, that's been working really well for us.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when you think back about, again, kind of early days, 2019, 20, like what were some of your first projects that you all found and took on?
Yeah, so the first project where I kind of jumped in the middle of it was a custom home build in Central Austin that ended up on the cover of Austin Home Magazine. So right out of the gate, we worked off a very large project. And, I don't think I think I'm not going to say that we bit off more than we could chew. Obviously, like, the finished result was there, but there were certainly a lot of bumps, along that road. And, I can tell you from a back office side, like, we're really working from nothing in starting, because I'm trying to jump into this project with just a mess of systems. And I think it's a really good kind of transition into like why, I think project management, budgeting software is just critical to the success of a project. But that was, the biggest challenge that we faced. And so it's kind of, that's really what I got into the business, at that time to do, was to kind of build out those systems. But, it wasn't easy. It was hard, especially not having the industry background and understanding the construction business. So I'm learning on the fly, have an idea of what we need and how it needs to be done. And, you know, I wasn't exactly the company I was working for wasn't, you know, bleeding edge when it came to that kind of stuff as it was. We were a bit of a mess too, but, you know, that's when I started really trying to figure out, okay, well, what can we do to be more efficient? Where are we spending all this time? Why is it taking me so long to generate an invoice? Why does our budget, you know, look like this and relied on, you know, all these key entries? So, that's when we brought on our first, you know, or signed up for our first construction management software. And you know, working with some guys on the team at the time that were not really willing to play ball, you know, and want to do that. I'm sure that's something that you guys experience all the time. In getting people to kind of buy in to the software was a bit of a challenge, and especially because it didn't work, you know. And it's so the first, and I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, but you know, it wasn't functional. I mean, it's a very well-known software, and at the time, you know, the budget was my biggest pain point, and being able to see at a glance, where is this project? How are we tracking? Where are we, you know, where are we missing a change order somewhere? Where are we, you know, against our target? How much money are we going to make on this? What can we afford to, you know, who could we afford to bring on, or, you know, what can we invest in the company? And there was just nothing. And then we were still spending all of our time, you know, kind of trying to make the software work on calls with their team and having them trying to troubleshoot and figure out what was wrong. And, yeah, so it was a bit of a challenge. And then, you know, we migrated to another software after that, which was probably overkill for what we needed, but was what we wanted, you know. We were paying for a lot of bells and whistles that weren't really relevant to an organization that was focused on residential at the size that we had, but it worked, and it worked really well. And it was, you know, it solved that problem, but you know, that's when we were up for our contract renewal there. That's why we ended up jumping on with JobTread. And we've only been using you guys for a couple of months. I mean, I think it's June was when we did our onboarding. And so, yeah, kind of lost my train of thought there, but you know, that's how we ended up, you know, with JobTread. And that was really, like I said, one of the bigger pain points for me in building out the business, and really, all of that, you know, the reason why it's critical to us is to free us up to focus on the things where we're adding the most value. We need to be engaging we need to be spending more time with our clients, more time with our subs, more time in the field. Those are the elements that make a successful construction project. And if you're in the office all the time, you know, and it takes you a half a day to generate an invoice and, or send out an estimate, do any of those things, like, that's just less time that you're spending on the important stuff. The problem, like I said, the construction is problem solving. And if you're spending all day doing, you know, that stuff, you don't have the bandwidth to focus on what's important. So that's why it's such a big deal to me.
I think though, you know, again, like what you sort of figured out very quickly though, was that you needed a lot more visibility into the financial aspects of managing these projects. And, you know, even though you kind of went through a handful of different softwares, like, you know, the key is because like so many people don't, you know, they just don't ever really have that epiphany that like, man, like we need to be managing the job finances in real time. And we can't just wait till the end of the job and just have a, you know, a hope or wish and a prayer that somehow we're going to make money on this project. Like so many contractors do that. And so it's awesome that, like, you know, again, like you had that experience and you knew that you needed to find a solid piece of, you know, software, you know, project management software to help you to make sure that you don't go down that path. Because so many people would take on that huge, you know, first project and just, you know, totally lose their ass and then ultimately end up saying, never mind, this isn't for me. I'm glad that you guys at least kind of knew that you needed something. Now, again, there's a lot of different flavors of software out there, and some of them are much more antiquated and been started 10, 15, 20 years ago. Not maybe not as modern or easy to use, but at the end of the day, like, you knew that you needed something, and that's I'd say that's step one.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you hit on something else, was the real time. And I think that's one of the things that y'all's software does better than anybody else is and again, for us, and every different things are designed for different systems. We've been really happy with JobTread because I feel like it was designed for what we do specifically. So the real-time nature of the mobile app and the amount of steps it took me and some of the other softwares to issue a change order and how that was in fact the budget and all these other things, it took forever. And then what ended up happening was sometimes those change orders wouldn't get out and the clients wouldn't have the opportunity to say no, right? And that's something that we promise, from the get-go, is we want to put the clients in charge of their own budget. It's their money, right? It's our job as builders to make sure that they're, comfortable with what they're getting. Most of our clients we're working with normal folks that have, this is one of the most, aside from maybe the purchase of the house, it's the most expensive thing they're ever going to do. And we've got to make sure that they understand where they're going. And, when we, have a client meeting, being able to either, on the phone, in the truck, like right then and there, fire off hey, we talked about this. If we want to go with this elevated feature, add this to the scope, this is what you're looking at, right? And being able to put that change order together, send it off and be like, we can't start this until you sign off on it, is critical. And it's something that we've gotten a lot better at, and we've seen the benefits of since we started using JobTread, because it's so easy to send those out. And I'll say it's the same thing for the expenses. That's the simplest, and I mean this in the best way, dumbest down version of an expense entry that we've ever had. It is ridiculously easy to use, to do it from your phone. It's almost easier to do it from the phone than it is the computer. I mean, they're comparable, but just having that kind of duality, or whatever you want to call it, optionality to put those in, is what the ease of data entry contributes to that real-time data and project budget being more accurate, because it's so easy to enter in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you said something really interesting there. I mean, like, the goal of putting the client in charge of their own budget. I think so many times people, sort of feel like, as the contractor, like, it's up to them to, figure out what this is going to cost, and hey, this is the cost. If you can't afford it, then maybe we're not the right one. I love your approach of like, you want to work with them and make sure they know they're in control, and you give them options. It's like, look, if you can't afford, the high-end premium luxury, X, Y, and Z, then great. Like, we can, let's look at something, middle of the line, or maybe we need to look for something more affordable, like helping them to really understand the impact of their own selections, their own choices, because like at the end of the day, like, you probably don't really care what they want to implement. You just need to know, what can you afford? What are you going to be happy with? And we're happy to get it done. But like, making that process easier for the homeowner, or for the commercial property owner, like, to really understand the impact of their decisions on that budget. I mean, that's the name of the game here. At the end of the day, if they're happy and they're willing to spend, any amount, awesome. Like, I'm sure you will oblige. If though they got a tight budget and they need to stay within that, the worst thing that can happen is like, you just overrun the budget. Now they're like super upset. I think by putting that power back in their hands and giving them that ability to see where they're at in real time, it just makes it a much better customer experience in the long haul.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the most important part for us, and I think this goes for most builders, it's client education too. Like, in addition to being the biggest expense a lot of our customers will make. It's also going to be it might be the only time they ever do it. It's not something that people are building up and like, they did one little project and another little project and they're just like going up and up and up. A lot of times this is, people bought their forever home. They're ready to make it theirs. Like, let's go. But most of the clients that we talk to, it's analogous to, they think it's just like buying a car. Like, I want this car. It's this price. Like, here, if we're coming, ideally, we're always involved as early as possible in any project, right? But if somebody's, we'll ask all the time. We'll go on a site visit. There's a lot of pointing. I want this here and this here and this here. Like, tell me how much this is going to cost. And it's like somewhere between $50,000 and $1 million. I don't know. So it's in that range, right? And so for us, it's about being, a coach and a resource. Okay, even if you don't work with us, like, this is how this process is going to work, right? This is what you need to do in order to have a successful project. And especially if you're going to, stick to a budget, you need to go through, a design process. You really should have a builder involved, because a lot of times clients, they're going to go nuts pointing and shooting. They're going to get to, their finished set of plans, and they've designed, it's the architect's job to get the client what they want, right? And to put that down on paper. But they're going to design, if there's no control on costs here, people you're going to design, something that's 2-3 times, what they want to spend. So that's where, we try to use that example as a way to get in early and create that feedback loop in those bumpers. And sometimes clients don't, they're hesitant to give you a budget because they think like, oh, well, what if it only costs half this? First of all, it never costs half that. And that is just, people, very rarely do we get somebody that has a budget that's 2 or 3 times what something is going to cost. It just doesn't happen. And if it did, it wouldn't change the way that we bid it. We're a cost plus builder. We're very transparent. We don't just inflate the price of something because we can get it. That's not what we do. So it's getting clients to understand that process, having a builder that can, just based on a sketch conversation, be like, hey, if we do this, then, that's gonna max you out on your budget, right? Like, this is kind of where the scope of the project needs to stop. Like, we can't do the, add on the extra bathroom or, whatever it is. And so that's a big piece of, what we do as far as putting clients in control of their budget, is having them understand that process and that it is complex. And I won't know how much your project really is going to cost down to the penny until we're done, which can be scary for people, but we're really good at establishing a budget, right? And saying, hey, we're going to be within this, range, overall in your project. But another example, my partner, when he was in production, they get a new set of plans and a new development. It'd taken 3 times building that exact same house before they really dialed in every single detail and didn't, eliminated the conflicts in the field and, any variation between structural and architectural and, how everything fit together. I mean, it's three cracks at it. We don't have that. There's inevitable rebuilds. We obviously, we do everything we can to avoid that. But it happens, and especially in remodels, right? Like, you need to work in a healthy contingency budget based on your unknowns. And so there's a lot of, my sales process is it's way more education than it is, tooting my own horn and talking about how great we are. It's really about educating the customers as to how this works when you're doing some, a custom build or a custom remodel.
Yeah, I think that, that really is what I've seen is it helps tremendously to build the trust with that client, even before they become a client. Like, when they feel like you are genuinely trying to help them understand and educating them on the process. And it's like, hey, look, even if you don't go as us, like, this is what you should know. This is what you should expect. Like, I think that's tremendously valuable to really help establish that relationship of, look, I'm here as a trusted resource. And I think, with the cost plus model, like, at the end of the day, it's like, look, we're happy to do whatever you want to do. Again, you're in control of that budget. I think when they feel that and they can understand and appreciate that, it does sort of eliminate one of those, oh, is this just another sales guy trying to, sell me the biggest ticket item, versus we want to do what's right.
Well, there's two things that we need to address whenever we're talking about cost plus. One, and this is a mistake that we've made in the past, is just because it's a cost plus doesn't mean it's just like, all right, well, at the end of the project, we're a little bit over and, well, it's cost plus. And like I said, that's the worst conversation to have with the client. When you're in a cost plus situation, you still have a target budget. If you just blow through your cost plus estimates and you're like, well, I'm covered, like, you're going to have a lot of unhappy customers. So what we, that's good. It goes back to the change orders. It's like, hey, if something's trending over budget, that needs to be communicated and it needs to be, explained. Hey, this went over because of why. It could be we've had, when prices were going crazy on PVC, there were just building material costs were just in flux and they were a little bit more expensive than we thought. And, in a remodel, there could be a detail on there that, turned out to be a little bit harder to execute, or, what was on plan wasn't really going to work. So we had to modify it and it was going to be a little bit more. Those things need to be communicated. There needs to be an expectation set for that, that those things do come up and what's going to happen when it does. And, for things that are unforeseen, that's what the contingency budget for. We'll issue a change order, a $0 change order that pulls from that budget, but it establishes, at the end of the project, we ended up using half of our contingency budget. Like, what happened? Where, like, what did we need that for? Well, here's the paper trail of everything that, that led to that. And ideally, it's not really a question at the end of the project because it'd been in the loop the whole time.
No. When you've kind of talked about, you did the custom home build, you've done some remodels. I know you also do some light commercial. When you think about these different types of projects, what do you see as the biggest differences between them? And do you have a preference? Like, how do you evaluate, a full home build from a remodel versus a commercial project, and sort of what's like the average, price point for those, kind of duration, things like that?
Yeah. Well, for us, we have our process and we also have our sub base. Like, we know what our teams can do. We're always looking for talented tradespeople, but we also very much value the building a trust with a team and, somebody that understands your expectations for quality, for cleanliness, for showing up on time, for all the things that you need for, a good, sub general relationship. So our subs do kind of some light commercial work. We're just, we're not doing multifamily. We're not doing big, industrial or tilt wall. Like, we kind of know what's in our wheelhouse. So we really treat every project the same, whether, we did a sound wall for in a high rise, but it still flowed through our process just like a kitchen remodel would. It's the same, getting our materials list and selections from the client and building out a schedule and set it. Like, it's for us, they're really the same. And the light commercial projects that we do, as long as that's, we've got the team to execute it and we can flow it through our system and make sure that our boxes are checked, then, the project's it's a good fit. We need to make sure that it obviously, schedule is a big thing for us. Like, we don't take on more projects than we can be at every single day. So that's, a big, when we're choosing projects, That's really important. But, as far as the differences go, there's obviously different priorities. I think when you're working on a custom home, that's something that people are in every day, and there's an attention to detail that's there that sometimes in commercial, this is about, if it's a retail space and they've got a target date that they need to be open by. It's not to say that, we necessarily cut any corners, but your speed becomes the priority. And so we try to understand those aspects of it too. But we've worked on commercial projects that were, every bit as detailed as anything we've done on a residential. So it's, I want to say we take it on a case by case basis, but we kind of know, the architects and designers that we work with kind of know where we fit too. So, we try to find the projects that are in that sweet spot, whether they're residential or commercial.
Sure. And so do you find that the architects and designers, are they bringing you a lot of the projects and the work, or are you also bringing them, to some projects where maybe it found you and that you need some of that design help in there?
Yeah, I would say it's maybe 70-30. As far as like the split, I would say 70% architects are kind of coming to us. And then 30% we're bringing jobs to the architect or designer. And that's whenever it is that way, again, we're very lucky to have a pretty deep pool of designers and architects that we've worked with before. I try to feel out clients to who's going to be the best fit. Who is this? Because when your owner, your weekly, or we do weekly owner architect client meetings for every project, where this is a big marriage, right, between the three of us. What's it going to look like? Where there's certain personalities that I think drive better with other personalities, styles, those kinds of things. Like you've got to kind of make an educated guess on, you got to play matchmaker a little bit, who's going to be the best fit. And that's what we try to do.
Have you found that there's certain type of client or project that just not a good fit for you all, and you sort of walk away or refer it out to someone else?
Yeah, I mean, we've done both. We've walked away from projects. I think that the ones that we've walked away from, we've walked away really early. And sometimes, there are, there's just some red flags, and, life is short. These projects they're already stressful, right? Like, let's not make them more stressful. Let's do what we can to make these projects fun and get our clients excited about working with us in the finished project, and understanding that it's going to be messy, but developing that trust that, we're going to take care of things. But sometimes, you get a bad vibe from folks, and in certain, and it's not demanding. We work with demanding clients all the time, but there's got to be a mutual respect there, right? And unfortunately, there's people out there that don't have that respect for people that work for them, with them, whatever it is.
So is that like one of the is that like a red flag that somehow, like, how are you picking up on that? And like, what might these red flags be that, like, you sort of, because obviously, like you said, the earlier you can detect that, the better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like to just,
man, I don't know. A spidey sense, like you can get vibes from people. And I know I've hate to just be like, yeah, vibes, man. But it's sometimes at the end of the day, it's, how they talk to you. And how do you think they would treat you and your team and your subs, through a project? And there's got to be a mutual respect there. There has to be we won't take on a project where it's us versus. There's no versus. And I think that's another thing when you're working. We don't do a lot of work for, developers or flippers, because it's you versus. they are doing everything they can to drive that price down as low as they can, and you're doing everything to make as much money. It's not a collaborative effort. Our clients, anybody that we work with, they have to want us to make money, right? They have to want us to feed our families and be around, in 20 years or however many years, if there's a warranty issue or whatever. Like we need clients that want us to win because we want them to win, and we all need to be pulling in the same direction. And if we're not, if I don't think that I can get all of us pulling in the same direction, then like it's not going to work. And I don't think that that's a science. I don't think that you can codify how you pick up on those things, but I think you need to be very direct in even saying that directly, like, hey, we need to be on the same page here, right? Because if this is going to be a 12 to 18 month build and we're just going to be miserable in every call, and it's going to be, it doesn't have to be like that. And I think the key is really to establish, those ground rules from the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably the most common thing I hear is like when the client is just opens up kind of complaining about their last contractor and, everything that went wrong and just all the situations. I've heard a couple times where they're like, they're talking about litigation. It's like, okay, like I'll just walk away now. Like, why would I want to get into that same situation?
We have worked for lawyers, but I know builders that won't do projects for lawyers. And that's, there's good and bad in every profession. But yeah, if somebody's, sued the last 3 people that they've worked for, probably a big red flag to look out for.
Yeah. So it sounds like, you and Jared have, built a really, solid stable of trade partners. Like how have you gone about that? And where are you finding the guys? How do you keep them, working for you and incentivized to be your go-tos? Like, cause a lot of people struggle with that, right? Like they struggle to find, people, they struggle to feel like they can, maintain that high level of quality if they were to just do it themselves or bring their own in-house people to do it. Like how do you manage all that, the scheduling with the trade partners, things like that?
I mean, I think it's the exact same way, the exact same, I don't know, belief, way of doing things, that it's the same relationship with us and the client as with us and the subs. It's all the same things. I want my subs to make money. I want my subs to have a happy work environment, that they want to show up. And we're not the, we're not the kind of, I think that we have very high expectations, and all of our subs know that. And we know that sometimes things are going to go wrong, and sometimes maybe somebody on a crew messes up, and is going to redo something. But, we're going to let them know, but we're also not going to belittle them. And I do think that, for better or worse, that is a lot more prevalent in this industry than maybe some others, where that's still kind of accepted, an old school, kind of hard nosed, fist pounding kind of a builder. And that's honestly, like, there's a lot of very successful builders out there, and I think it's just like a coach, right? Like there's watching the Cowboys documentary right now. You've got your Jimmy Johnsons, hard, like scream and yell coaches. And then you've got your Barry Switzers that are a little bit more like, hey, we're all professionals here. Like, let's create a positive atmosphere. At the end of the day, it's just different leadership styles. That's how we do it. And I think our subs appreciate that. And they also know, like, you can't take advantage of it, because, it's at the end of the day, like, if you do, we can bring somebody else in. And so I think once you get to a certain level, and there's you've done enough of these projects together, that's what really helps. And can get you, you get them out of a pinch, they get you out of a pinch. and you're not beating them up on price at every single turn. You're okay with them making some money, because they're also going to work, you're going to get a higher quality product, and a higher quality finish.
Do you have a process for vetting like a new, a new sub trade partner that you want to bring in?
Yeah, I mean, later this afternoon, if we've got a new sub coming into the office, I'm not going to say it's it's effectively a job interview. How are you going to show up? What do you look like? How do you present yourself? Tell me about the projects that you've done in the past. Tell me something that went completely haywire. What are the GCs that you like to work with doing? Why aren't you working with, what happened with a GC that you don't work with anymore? It's sort of the same, types of questions you would have in a normal job interview. But that's the vetting. Obviously, if we can go see some work, that's another, big piece of it. Referrals, what is your back office like? How are you scheduling? What are you, how are you handling that piece of it? For, a lot of our trades, like if we're always going to prefer that somebody has an office manager, somebody that can handle scheduling. And if not, we've got to understand your bandwidth and how you work, and the scheduling, invoicing, those are all critical pieces of it, right? Where we've worked with subs in the past that we don't anymore, I would say that that's the number one thing that ends up, we don't know what's going on, where we're falling. We'll try to get here this day. I forgot, but there's not a centralized, hey, this is how we schedule, or, some of our guys don't have an office manager, but they're just very organized, and they know exactly where they're going to be that week. And so those are all big things that we look for.
Well, if you find any of them that need some software to help them, I may know a guy.
Absolutely.
It's really great insight though, because it ultimately can be the difference maker between having someone that's reliable, dependable, who's going to do high quality work, is what is the team that they have in place? How organized are they? How are they going to manage the processes from scheduling, invoicing, things like that are going to directly affect, how your job is being run and performed. So, I think these are all great questions. When you assign them work, are you having them go and actually bid on every project and what they're going to charge you, or do you have agreed upon rates that you're paying, whether it's per square foot, per linear foot, hours, days? How do you think about doing all that?
Well, I'll walk you through our estimating process, which JobTread has been a big part of streamlining that. And so once I kind of got my bearings on your quantity formula feature, I've been having meetings with my subs and sitting down and just getting pricing lists. Price per square foot for a level 5 finish, a level 4 finish, a level 3 for hanging sheetrock, for foundations, price per square foot. So what I'm trying to do in an effort to to win more jobs is, a lot of times, if we're bidding a schematic before we have structurals or something like that, we're putting where I think a lot of folks would just do kind of a general, high level estimate, giving a range on a couple different spaces or big scopes of work. I try to just get it to where I can put in, using the templates, I can throw in a schematic set of plans, and I can give a rough idea of what we're looking at, price per square foot for a foundation, for frame, for drywall, for paint. And I'm able to do that very quickly in the takeoff tool. And my favorite part about it is when I'm done with those takeoffs, it's flowing straight into my budget. And I have the ability to, it's so easy to tweak things where, hey, on this project, maybe price per square foot's not really relevant. it's really easy for me to just eliminate that from the budget without having created a whole different line item and all these other things. So that's, when we're putting an estimate together, I try to make it just as detailed, make it look like the final budget that I'm going to send over. But again, client education, you have to tell them, hey, I don't have hard bids for this. And the process is we're going, once we're under contract, because I'm not like wasting my subs time. I don't want to send them every lead I get and have them bid a set of plans if I'm not going to win the job. I have to know these prices. And so I'm able to do that a lot more. If I as a business owner and an entrepreneur, I'm trying to get as much out of my brain as possible. And I can't be the one, Jared and I are very good at just telling ballparking stuff on an estimate, but that's not the way we want to do it moving forward, and having those standardized price, and also just being able to speak with confidence. How did you get this number? Where did this come from? My other guy, I got another bid who said it was, half that. Well, this is why you have X amount of drywall. It costs this much per square foot. And then the labor to install it costs this much per square foot. I mean, your other guy, it's impossible to do at that price, and he's going to ask you for more money later. So being able to kind of stand behind the accuracy of those, super important. Understanding that process, that, hey, as we get more detailed, this is going to evolve. These prices are going to evolve, but we're confident that this is going to be your range. I need you to be able to spend this in order to take this project on. If you say, hey, I need to do this for $100,000 less, so it's like, I can't, we're not the best fit, like we would need to establish a budget of this much. And, we have come under budget on projects. And if, where that's the best final invoice ever, when it's lower than what they were expecting. But, that's, you need to set those expectations and understand the process of, okay, we use specialized labor for every trade. We don't have our plumbers also doing electric, and my trim guy's not going to be the one painting. Our guys do one thing and they do it really well. And that, in our opinion, he delivers a higher quality product. So yeah, that piece of it though, the estimating and the way that we flow all that has been great, because we can be a lot more accurate, a lot faster.
Yeah, I love too how you're working with your trades to help sort of them understand and figure out, what could be a, unitized, price for you. That's super beneficial. I think you're going to really like, we have an upcoming feature that should be coming out any day now, but it's going to allow you to create new columns directly in your budget that can be, essentially formulas, where if you wanted to see, let's say you got a fixed, price from one of your trade partners to hang some drywall or whatever. Like if you wanted to easily be able to calculate, that cost per square foot, for example, like you'd be able to have that as a new column where you could always kind of look and see what it is, just so that you can always kind of use that as a check, against what you typically would pay per square foot. Or if you even wanted to, help them and show them kind of variations from job to job and how, you need to kind of get that a little bit more consistent. I think it could be a really helpful tool since it sounds like you kind of hone in on that square foot pricing.
Y'all are always one step ahead, so that sounds great.
Well, look, no, again, I appreciate, all of the insight you've shared here. So I'm curious, so like when you think back, from again, the first couple projects you've run to, what it's like, managing, running projects today, or even just general business advice, like what advice would you give to others, who maybe earlier on in their career, still got one foot in the trades, trying to kind of get into the business side, want to start up something, want to start their own, what do you wish you would have known that you now know, or what advice would you give to someone who's earlier on?
Well, I mean, I can tell you my biggest mistake was scaling too fast. We weren't always two people. We brought on too many people before we had a codified process and expectations, and that's, we needed you get to a point where you can take on all this the work, and you are kind of feeling some momentum. But if you hire too fast and your processes aren't codified and you just kind of throw somebody to the fire, you're going to be asking yourself, why am I'm doing your job? And that's, I don't think that we, I don't think that I'm, and whatever, for better or worse, at this point, I'm not focused on growth as much as I am efficiency and process. And that's where I'm laser focused. I'm not trying to look past that. I'm trying to get to a point where either I'm saying no to I'm bored and I'm saying no to work because we're at capacity. I need both of those boxes to be checked before we start, bringing somebody on. But being operationally efficient and codifying, like getting your process down and being able to train somebody, hiring somebody before you have any kind of training manual, SOP, how are you going to measure this person's success? Biggest mistake I made by far. And so I'm focused more on getting the business and our process and our checklists and our to-dos and our scheduling and everything dialed down to the point where that piece, every project's obviously different, but it needs to live in our framework. And it can obviously, pivot based on the project, but there's certain things that you have to do every job. And I want to make sure that we're just doing those things on every job, before we start to scale. But, using tools like JobTread, we're doing the same amount of volume with 2 people that we were doing with 7. And that's because of the efficiency. So I don't think either one of us are happy with all that. And we know that we've got a lot of work to do on those pieces, before, as we continue to grow. But, we want to be behind on hiring, this time. We want to make sure that we're not hiring and then kind of scrambling. We want to make sure that we're just dialed in. So that's my biggest lesson learned, I guess.
Man, that is awesome, man. I think you nailed it. That's so important for people to know, is that, again, like you need to dial in your processes, have them documented, really understand what does it take to successfully sell, manage, execute, deliver, a project within your business, whatever type of project that may be. Like you got to define that. I find so many people who they think they're just feeling overwhelmed and they're stressed and that they just need to hire people. And like, it's like you're throwing bodies at problems that you haven't even tried to understand. You got to drill in and say, what is the real bottleneck here? What is the real root issue? And how can I fix that? And so many times it's just the act of trying to identify it and then come up with a solution to make yourself or whoever, whatever, is leading to that bottleneck more efficient. Like so many times you can solve your own problems without having to just throw bodies at this thing, because that's not going to scale. And it sounds like you saw that, you learned that firsthand, and then, again, it's so much easier and more affordable to find, some way to leverage software technology to help improve efficiencies than, again, to bring on full-time salaried employees. It's so much better to take your time to build a solid foundation and to get that, machine like up and running, well-oiled, operating efficient, and then you focus on scaling. But like, again, you can't put the cart before the horse. Yeah. I think a lot of people do that.
Yeah, no, I'm firmly on the horse right now. And then whenever we're ready, we'll start looking into carts. So
I love it. Well, look, Bob, I really appreciate all the insight and everything that you've shared here about, how you and Jared have built your business, the challenges that you've had, how you've, become a lot more efficient and systematized over the years. You guys are doing great work, really exciting to see the growth, and the success that you guys have. And, look forward to seeing many more years of great success from you guys, because I have no doubt, you got a very bright future ahead and you're doing all the right moves. So, thank you for being a great role model for everyone else out there in the community. Appreciate you coming on and sharing all that with us today.
Appreciate it, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Have a good one.
You too.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Builder Stories. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and gained valuable insights that can help you in your journey along the way. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and leave us a review. And as always, if you or someone you know has a story to share, please contact us at builderstories.com. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Eric Fortenberry, and remember, every builder has a unique story. Keep building yours.